Christy here, Real Fit for Real Life, and this is the intro to your 6-week challenge, specifically about the measurements you need to take on your self-assessment. First, you have your resting heart rate. This is going to be the simplest way to figure out your cardiorespiratory health and stamina. So, we could do the 3-minute step test and hook you up to electrodes, put you on a treadmill, but really, what is your resting heart rate? That can tell me a lot. So in order to get a resting heart rate, you need to be in a resting state. You can do it before you even get out of bed in the morning or when you've been sitting on the couch for a while, but you're in a resting state. You haven't been running around, you're not agitated. Don't do it right after you've had coffee, okay? So resting heart rate, you want to find your resting heart rate on your carotid artery. So right here, you'll find that, feel that pulse in your neck. Just kind of trace the jawline and then gently press. Don't push too hard because that can slow it down. So press gently, and then you're going to count for a full minute, okay? A full minute, that's the tricky part. But that's your most accurate, to count for a full minute instead of count for 20 seconds and multiply by 3, or count for 10 seconds and multiply by 6. It's more accurate to do the full minute. Now, another thing you can use, there are some free apps that take your resting heart rate by placing your index finger over the camera of your smartphone, and it will detect your pulse. And that can also give you a resting heart rate reading. Sometimes those don't work so great, so you might want to take your resting heart rate over the course of a few different tries and see kind of what the average is. It's one of the most important numbers for you to know, more important than knowing a number on the scale. Know your resting heart rate, okay? And we do want to see an improvement in that by the end of the 6 weeks. The 1 mile pace, that is optional. That is if you are a runner or a walker, how long does it take you to cover 1 mile? Okay, the strength tests. The first one is a plank. And the plank, you just want to do a low plank. So on your elbows and on your toes, and have someone time you, or you hold your timer, and as soon as you press up into the toes, set the timer. This is a timed plank, so you're seeing how long you can hold this before you collapse and pass out. Make sure that when you're doing this, and that's why it's best if someone can do it for you, that your hips are down in line and that they're level, and your elbows are right underneath the shoulders. And just look down, keeping your spine long. Really squeeze your thighs and your glutes, inner thighs and abs, and press actively into the forearms. So it's not just your abs. This is your whole body, but you'll really feel that core. Your goal is just as long as you can, okay? If you've got back issues, be very cautious. If you need to skip the plank test, skip it. Next, push-up test. This is if you can on your toes. And I don't call them girl push-ups because I find that very insulting. I call them modified push-ups because a lot of men I work with have to do modified push-ups, and they do not appreciate when we call them girl push-ups. So modified push-ups, if you need to modify, take note and say, I had to do the modified, but this is how many I did. So modified just means that you are on the knees, but you are still, you've got a nice long line from the thighs up to the spine. And I have a YouTube video on how to do a perfect push-up. So if you're unsure about push-up form, watch that video. We're just doing 90 degree, so don't go lower, but don't go like halfway, because that's, again, going to give you a false results. If you can, full push-ups, even if, it's only, there's my noisy, I'm not warmed up, so my noisy elbow. Make sure that you're a little bit warmed up. Even if you can only do 2 full push-ups. I would rather you try the full push-ups just to kind of see what you're capable of. Really go to failure. So this one is not timed. Don't go fast, go at a nice easy pace. And how many can you do in a row before you just drop, okay? The wall sit is another strength test, and the wall sit is a great way. I'm gonna show you over here. The wall sit, you want your feet hip width, maybe a little bit wider. And as you sink down the wall, take your feet about 2 feet away from the wall, and then you might need to get a little bit farther. And make sure you have good grip with your shoes. And then try to get into 90 degrees if you can. If that bugs your knees, come a little bit higher, but you don't want to be way up high because that's not really getting into the quads like we want to. Again, this one's timed, so this just gives us a rough idea of your leg strength. So push-up is upper body strength. Wall sit will give us an idea of your leg strength. A lot of women, all of our strength is in the legs, so we could hold this for days and days and days. Keep your back pressed actively into the wall. Keep your abs zipped up to protect your lower back muscles. And make sure that you're keeping your knees tracking in line with the toes. Keep your quads to the ceiling. Don't let the legs fall open. Don't let the legs fall in. So keep your railroad tracks, okay? And you're just timing. So this is more of a functional assessment for hamstrings. So you want to stand with your feet just under the hips, so hip width apart, and then make sure that you do this warm and best of 3 attempts. So exhale down and just kind of hold and breathe, take it a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. Exhale a little bit deeper. And just see how far you can get. And then just write down, I reached the floor. I got fingertips to floor. I got my palms to the floor. Or I reached my ankles. Or I reached the middle of my shin. If you are only coming to mid-shin, that is, you're borderline not functional, meaning you need some major physical therapy and work to get that flexibility. Make sure that when you're testing this, you don't lock the knees. See that? Never, ever, ever lock the knees, FYI. It's just so bad for the knees. You get a lot of wear and tear. So always maintain just a slight bend behind the knees. So that's your functional hamstring flexibility. This one is quadricep flexibility. And this one you want some padding. You also want to have, it's easiest with no shoes on. So, do you love my bright socks? Okay, so for this one, it's a little bit tricky to set up, and you need to do both right and left. So make note, and you are gonna score yourself here. So, get your toes up and lower your knee to the floor. And you want, again, a cushiony mat. You want to be more above the knee than directly on the kneecap. Now, you're gonna swing this opposite leg forward. And just, look, I'm just heel toeing into center. Now, if you cannot get to this position, your score is a 0. Sorry, guys. That just means there's nowhere to go but up, right? So that's okay. So if you cannot get into position, that's a 0. Also, you might want to make note, why can't you get into position? Is it this hip? Is it the back hip flexor, hamstring, quad? Is it just your own body mass is in the way? So take note, what is impeding you from getting into that? So if you can't get in, that's a 0. If you can get to here, that's a 1. If you can lift both hands to the thigh, but you're still really leaning forward, that's a 2. If you can come a little more upright, that's a 3. And if you can push almost straight up and down, that's a 4. And then if you can like feel the wall behind you. That is a 5. Also, left and right tend to be different, and so that's why you need to do both sides. So measure right and left separately. Often you're tighter on your stronger leg because it works so much more that it just is a bigger, tighter muscle. So I tend to be tighter on my right. So that's the quad. And then hips. So hips, 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 hips. Hips are really important. I have a whole nother YouTube video about hip mobility and hip flexibility. But here's a simple test. And this is a functional flexibility. Can you sit cross-legged? Okay. If you cannot sit cross-legged, you have a 0 as your score for hip flexibility. If you can't sit cross-legged, that's a 1. If you can come to fire log, that's ankle to knee, right here, that's a 3. If you can come forward into the 45 degrees, that's a 4. And if you can plop all the way forward, which I can't, but if you can plop yourself all the way down, then that's a 5. That means your hips are very flexible and you don't have that as a concern or an issue. In fact, it might be that you need a little bit more strength in the hips. They might be too loose and lax. So we want to balance that out. So that's hip mobility, okay? So those are your assessments. Get to it, fill out your self-assessments, and email those back to me as soon as you can. And let's see what kind of progress we can make in 6 weeks. I'm so excited. Thanks for joining me, Christy. Real Fit for Real Life.